Hallelujah. Shalom, family and friends. Welcome. Thank you for joining me. In this video, we're going to talk about the divine marriage, the divine divorce, what happened to the eternal covenant between Yah and Israel. In previous videos, I discussed issues of Hebrew marriage customs and how the covenant between Yah and Yasharal, the nation of Yasharal, is a marriage covenant. The Tehillim or Psalm chapter 15. Yahuwah, who shall abide in your tabernacle? Who shall dwell in your set-apart hill? He that walks uprightly and works righteousness and speaks the truth in his heart, in whose eyes a vile person is contemned, but he honors them that fear Yahuwah. He that swears to his own hurt and changes not. Malachi chapter 3. For I am Yahuwah, I change not, therefore you sons of Jacob are not consumed. This is a concept we need to understand going forward, discussing the divine divorce and the reasons why Yah, specifically the messenger of Yahuwah, needed to do what he did. Because Yahuwah does not break his own word. He does not violate his own commands and statutes. Vayikra, or Leviticus chapter 21. And he that is the high priest among his brothers, upon whose head the anointing oil was poured, and that is consecrated to put on the garments, shall not uncover his head, nor rend his clothes. And he shall take a wife in her virginity, a widow, or a divorced woman, or profane, or a harlot. These shall he not take, but he shall take a virgin of his own people to wife. Ibrim, or Hebrews chapter 9. But Mashiach, being come a high priest of good things to come, by a greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is to say, not of this building. So in a previous video I talked about how the messenger Yahuwah, called El Shaddai, was the being that made a covenant with the nation of Yasharal. That being, who incarnated as Yahushua HaMashiach, is the high priest in the Shemaim, the high priest in the heavens. So everything that Musha established on earth, the tabernacle and the priesthood, was a copy of what is in the heavens. We talked about previously how the covenant between Malach Yahuwah and the nation of Yasharal is a marriage covenant, the same between a husband and a wife. Yeshayahu, or Isaiah 54. For your maker is your husband, Yahuwah Zabaoth is his name, and your Redeemer, the set-apart one of Yasharal. The all of the whole earth shall he be called. After the reigns of Shaul, or King Saul, and King Dawood, King David, and King Shalama, King Solomon, the nation of Yasharal was divided into two houses. You had the house of Yasharal, or commonly called the Ephraim or Yosef, and then you had the house of Yehuda. Bereshit, or Genesis chapter 48. And Yasharal stretched out his right hand and laid it upon Ephraim's head, who was the younger, and his left hand upon Manasseh's head, guiding his hands wittingly, for Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Yusuf, and said, Alim, before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac did walk, the Alim which fed me all my life long unto this day, the angel which redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads, and let my name be named on them, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. So Father Jacob, Father Yasharal, gave his covenant name, the covenant name Yasharal, the name that El Shaddai gave him. He gave that as a blessing to Ephraim and Manasseh. So that's why the northern kingdom, the house of Yasharal, retained the name Yasharal, because that was the name that was given to Ephraim and Manasseh from Father Jacob, Father Yasharal. And Ephraim became the largest tribe in all of the tribes of the Israelites. So when the nation of Yasharal separated into two houses, the tribe of Ephraim and the tribe of Manasseh were in the northern kingdom, and the northern kingdom had the name House of Yasharal. Father Jacob also gave Ephraim the blessing of the firstborn son. Verse 19. And his father refused and said, I know it, my son, I know it. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. But truly his younger brothers shall be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. And Yasharal said unto Yusuf, Behold, I die, but Alim shall be with you, and bring you again unto the land of your fathers. Moreover, I have given to you one portion above your brothers, which I took out of the hand of the Amorite with my sword and with my bow. So here we see that Yasharal, Father Yasharal, gave Yusuf the blessing of the firstborn, the right of the firstborn. The firstborn son receives a double inheritance from the father. And we see that this is what Jacob, what Yasharal gave to Yusuf and his sons. Devarim, or Deuteronomy chapter 21. But he shall acknowledge the son of the hated for the firstborn, by giving him a double portion of all that he has, for he is the beginning of his strength. The right of the firstborn is his. So this is the custom, this is the Torah concerning the firstborn. The firstborn son receives a double inheritance from the father. And Jacob, Yasharal, gave this to Yusuf and his sons. So we see that when the nation of Yasharal divided into two houses, Yahuwah described this as the Malach Yahuwah being married to two sisters, and he had covenants with both sisters, both with the house of Yasharal and with the house of Yehuda. Ezekiel, or Ezekiel chapter 16. And again the word of Yahuwah came unto me, saying, Son of man, cause Jerusalem to know her abominations, and say, Thus says Adonai Yahuwah unto Jerusalem, Your birth and your nativity is of the land of Canaan. Your father was an Amorite, and your mother a Hittite. Now when I passed by you, and looked upon you, behold, your time was the time of love, and I spread my skirt over you, and covered your nakedness. Yes, I swore unto you, and entered into a covenant with you, says Adonai Yahuwah, and you became mine. So through the prophet, Yahuwah is speaking to Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the house of Yehuda. And he talks about how he made a covenant, referring to a marriage covenant, and Yehuda became his wife. Verse 46, and your elder sister is Samaria, she and her daughters that dwell at your left hand, and your younger sister that dwells at your right hand is Sodom and her daughters. Samaria represents the house of Yasharal. And he says that Samaria is the elder sister. Of course, the house of Yasharal from Ephraim and Manasseh had the right of the firstborn. So Samaria is described as the elder sister. Verse 53, when I shall bring again her captivity, the captivity of Sodom and her daughters, and the captivity of Samaria and her daughters, then will I bring again the captivity of your captives in the midst of them. When your sisters Sodom and her daughters shall return to their former estate, and Samaria and her daughters shall return to their former estate, then you and your daughters shall return to your former estate. So again, Yahuwah is describing Samaria, the house of Yasharal, and Jerusalem, the house of Yehuda, as two sisters that are married to him. Verse 59, for thus says Adonai Yahuwah, I will even deal with you as you have done, which has despised the oath and breaking the covenant. So he's describing them as breaking the covenant, as breaking the marriage covenant, in other words, committing adultery against him by worshiping other mighty ones and not obeying his commandments. Nevertheless, I will remember my covenant with you in the days of your youth, and I will establish unto you an everlasting covenant. Then shall you remember your ways and be ashamed, when you shall receive your sisters, your elder and your younger, and I will give them unto you for daughters, but not by your covenant. And I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall know that I am Yahuwah, that you may remember and be confounded, and never open your mouth any more because of your shame, when I am pacified toward you for all that you have done, says Adonai Yahuwah. So we have Yahuwah scolding his wife because of her bad behavior, because of her unfaithfulness, and Yahuwah saying that he will renew his covenant. He will make an everlasting covenant with the people of Yasharal as his wife. Chapter 23. The word of Yahuwah came again unto me, saying, Son of man, there were two women, the daughters of one mother, and they committed whoredoms in Egypt. They committed whoredoms in their youth. There were their breasts pressed, and there they bruised the teats of their virginity. And the names of them were Aholah the elder, and Aholibah her sister. And they were mine, and they bare sons and daughters. Thus were their names. Samaria is Aholah, and Jerusalem Aholibah. So again, we have Yahuwah describing the house of Yasharal as Aholah and Samaria, and the house of Yehuda as Aholibah and Jerusalem as two sisters, both of whom are married to him. Both of them are his wives. Aholah means her tent, and Aholibah means my tent. In other words, the temple was in the territory of Yehuda. So that's why he refers to the house of Yehuda as Aholibah, meaning my tent. And again, the house of Yasharal is described as the elder sister. So when we look at this description, Yahuwah in relationship to the nation of Yasharal describes himself as married to two sisters, the house of Yasharal and the house of Yehuda. The house of Yasharal being the elder sister, which reflects the family of our father Yaakov, being married to two sisters, La and Rachel, La being the elder sister. And when we look at how Yahuwah described the house of Yehuda as a holibah, meaning my tent, showing that the temple was in the territory of Yehuda, we see how the relationship between Yaakov and Rachel, Yaakov was drawn to Rachel more than La'ah. And we see that in the case of Father Yaakov's family, that Rachel gave birth to Yusuf, who eventually became the redeemer of the whole family when he became overseer over the kingdom of Egypt, where from the house of Yehuda will come the Mashiach, who will redeem the entire family of the nation of Yasharal. Devarim, or Deuteronomy chapter 24. When a man has taken a wife and married her, and it come to pass that she find no favor in his eyes, because he has found some uncleanness in her, let him write her a bill of divorcement, and give it in her hand, and send her out of his house. So this is the commandment concerning divorce, and we need to understand this clearly going forward. So that bill, it comes from the Hebrew word sefer, which means book, missive, document, writing. Divorcement comes from the Hebrew kerithuth. Divorce, dismissal, divorcement, a cutting. Send comes from the Hebrew shalach, which means to send away, let go, stretch out. This is also commonly translated as put away. So if a man is to divorce his wife, he is to give her a bill of divorcement and send her out of his house. Verse 2, and when she is departed out of his house, she may go and be another man's wife. And if the latter husband hate her, and write her a bill of divorcement, that's sefer kerithuth, and give it in her hand, and send her out of his house, again shalach. Or if the latter husband die, which took her to be his wife, her former husband, the first husband, which sent her away, may not take her again to be his wife. After that she is defiled, for that is abomination before Yahuwah, and you shall not cause the land to sin, which Yahuwah your Elohim gives you for an inheritance. So we need to understand this commandment, this law that was given by Yahuwah. And we also have to remember that Yahuwah does not violate his own commandments. So let's go to Yirmiyahu, or Jeremiah chapter 3. They say, if a man put away his wife, and she go from him, and become another man's, shall he return unto her again? So Yahuwah is asking the prophet this question. And of course, when we go to Devarim chapter 24, as we read before, her former husband, which sent her away, may not take her again to be his wife. After that she is defiled. So the answer to the first question is no. Continuing, shall not that land be greatly polluted? Let's see what the Torah says. For that is abomination before Yahuwah, and you shall not cause the land to sin, which Yahuwah your Elohim gives you for an inheritance. So the answer to the second question, shall not the land be greatly polluted? The answer is yes. If a man does that, the land shall be greatly polluted. And he continues, but you have played the harlot with many lovers, yet return again to me, says Yahuwah. So what's going on here? The Torah does not allow the woman who is put away to return back to the first husband. But Yahuwah says, return yet again to me, speaking about the house of Yasharal. And some may say, well, Yahuwah is the Almighty. He can do whatever he wants. Yet Yahuwah does not violate his own character. So what does this mean? Verse 6. Yahuwah said also unto me in the days of Yashayahu the king, have you seen that which backsliding Yashral has done? She has gone up upon every high mountain and under every green tree, and there has played the harlot. The house of Yashral is described as an unfaithful wife, committing adultery with other mighty ones, with idols, other gods. And I said, after she had done all these things, turn you unto me. But she returned not. And her treacherous sister Yehuda saw it. And I saw, when for all the causes whereby backsliding Yashral committed adultery, I had put her away, and given her a bill of divorce. Yet her treacherous sister Yehuda feared not, but went and played the harlot also. So here, Yahuwah speaks through the prophet, saying that he gave the house of Yasharal a bill of divorce and put her away. So again, the house of Yasharal and the house of Yehuda as two sisters who are the wives of Yahuwah. And these two sisters are misbehaving, committing adultery with other mighty ones, committing adultery with idols and other gods. So this is what we have described in the book of Yirmiyahu, that the covenant, the marriage covenant that was between Malach Yahuwah and the nation of Yasharal, which became the marriage covenant between the house of Yasharal and the house of Yehuda, those two houses being sisters and the wives of Malach Yahuwah, that first covenant between the house of Yasharal and Yahuwah was broken and nullified by a bill of divorcement. According to Torah, the husband gives the wife a bill of divorcement, Sefer Kerithuth, and sends her out of his house, Shalach. So the house of Yasharal was given a bill of divorcement and exiled out of the promised land. So the house of Yasharal lost its name, because the name Yasharal is a covenant name. That name Yasharal was given to Father Yaakov by Malach Yahuwah. It is a covenant name. And when that covenant was broken, that covenant was nullified by a bill of divorce, the house of Yasharal lost its name. They were known as those scattered among the Gentiles, or shortened into simply Gentiles. They were called Gentiles. In Bereshit, or Genesis chapter 48, Father Jacob said about Ephraim, and his father refused and said, I know it, my son, I know it. He shall become a people, and he also shall be great. But truly his younger brother, that is Ephraim, shall be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. That term nations is goyim, many times translated into English as Gentiles. So we see that Father Jacob already prophesied hundreds of years earlier that Ephraim would become a multitude of nations, in the Hebrew a multitude of goyim, commonly translated as Gentiles. We spoke about how Ephraim is the largest tribe. So Ephraim was the largest tribe in the house of Yasharal, and the house of Yasharal became known as Gentiles. Back to Yirmiyahu chapter 3. And it came to pass through the lightness of her whoredom that she defiled the land and committed adultery with stones and with stocks. And yet for all this her treacherous sister Yehuda has not turned unto me with her whole heart, but vainly, says Yahuwah. And Yahuwah said unto me, the backsliding Yasharal has justified herself more than the treacherous Yehuda. Verse 12. Go and proclaim these words toward the north, and say, return you backsliding Yasharal, says Yahuwah, and I will not cause my anger to fall upon you, for I am merciful, says Yahuwah, and I will not keep anger forever. So again, according to the Torah of Yahuwah, a man who divorces his wife is not allowed to take that wife back again. Yahuwah speaks through the prophet, telling Yasharal to come back after he has divorced the house of Yasharal. So what is going on here? Verse 13, only acknowledge your iniquity, that you have transgressed against Yahuwah your Elohim, and have scattered your ways to the strangers under every green tree, and you have not obeyed my voice, says Yahuwah. Turn, O backsliding children, says Yahuwah, for I am married unto you, and I will take you one of a city and two of a family, and I will bring you to Zion. So this is a prophecy. So something has to happen in order for Yahuwah to take the house of Yasharal back into a marriage covenant. Because according to the Torah, a man who divorces his wife is not allowed to take her back again. Usha, or Hosea chapter 4. Though you, Yasharal, play the harlot, yet let not Yehuda offend. And come not you unto Gilgal, neither go you up to Beth-aven, nor swear, Yahuwah lives. For Yasharal slides back as a backsliding heifer. Now Yahuwah will feed them as a lamb in a large place. Ephraim is joined to idols, let him alone. Ephraim being the house of Yasharal. So we see the house of Yasharal, and it says, let not Yehuda offend, talking about the house of Yehuda. So the commandment is to Yehuda, the house of Yehuda, is to not deal with the house of Yasharal. Let him alone. Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah chapter 7. And I will cast you out of my sight, as I have cast out all your brothers, even the whole seed of Ephraim. Therefore pray not you for this people, neither lift up cry, nor pray for them, neither make intercession to me, for I will not hear you. So this is what we see forming the division between the house of Yehuda and the house of Yasharal. and why the Yahudim, the Judeans, commonly called the Jews, did not deal with Israelites from the house of Yasharal. So this is what we see happening. The house of Yehuda, commonly called Jews, is separated from the house of Yasharal, which became known as those scattered among the Gentiles, or simply Gentiles. The commandment in Hosea chapter 4 is, Ephraim is joined to idols, let him alone. So the Judeans, the Yahudim, stopped interacting with Israelites from the house of Yasharal, while the house of Yasharal received a bill of divorcement. So we see a wall of partition between the two houses, between the two sisters. Devarim, or Deuteronomy chapter 24. Her former husband, which sent her away, may not take her again to be his wife. After that she is defiled. For that is abomination before Yahuwah. And you shall not cause the land to sin, which Yahuwah your Elohim gives you for an inheritance. Acts chapter 10. And he said unto them, You know how that it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Yehudi, or Judean, to keep company, or come unto one of another nation. Baalim has showed me that I should not call any man common or unclean. So Kepha spoke this to Cornelius. However, according to the Torah, there is one Torah for the native-born Israelite and for the stranger that dwells among them or sojourns among them. Ephesians chapter 2. At that time you were without Mashiach, being aliens from the commonwealth of Yasharal and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope and without Elohim in the world. Shaul or Paul could not have been writing this to foreigners, because foreigners, according to the Torah, could worship Yahuwah if they obeyed all the laws and commandments. So he couldn't be speaking to foreigners saying that they have no hope and without Elohim in the world. Shaul or Paul was speaking to the Israelites of the house of Yasharal, who at this time were called Gentiles. Yeshayahu, or Isaiah chapter 50. First we're going to look at the KJV version, which is based on the Masoretic text. Thus says Yahuwah, Where is the bill of your mother's divorcement, whom I have put away? Or which of my creditors is it to whom I sold you? Behold, for your iniquities have you sold yourselves, and for your transgressions is your mother put away. So here we have the question, where is the bill of your mother's divorcement? Talking about the bill of divorcement given to the house of Yasharal. That word where is translated from the Hebrew ai, which can be translated into English as where, why, how, which, what. So when we look at the translation in the Brenton, which is based on the Septuagint, thus says Yahuwah, Of what kind is your mother's bill of divorcement, by which I put her away? Or to which debtor have I sold you? Behold, you are sold for your sins, and for your iniquities have I put your mother away. So we see that the reason that Yahuwah gave the house of Yasharal a bill of divorcement and put her away, exiled her, was because of her sins, because of her iniquities, because the house of Yasharal committed adultery against him by not obeying his commandments, by worshiping other mighty ones, by worshiping idols.
We started Yeshayahu chapter 50 with a question referring to the divorce that was given to the house of Yasharal. So let's continue. Wherefore, when I came, was there no man? When I called, was there none to answer? Is my hand shortened at all, that it cannot redeem? Or have I no power to deliver? Behold, at my rebuke I dry up the sea. I make the rivers a wilderness. Their fish stinks, because there is no water, and dies for thirst. I clothe the heavens with blackness, and I make sackcloth their covering. Adonai Yahuwah has given me the tongue of the learned, that I should know how to speak a word in season to him that is weary. He wakens morning by morning. He wakens my ear to hear as the learned. Adonai Yahuwah has opened my ear, and I was not rebellious, neither turned away back. So here we start to see that Yahuwah is going to send somebody to deal with this divorce certificate. I gave my back to the smiters, and my cheeks to them that plucked off the hair. I hid not my face from shame and spitting. For Adonai Yahuwah will help me, therefore shall I not be confounded. Therefore have I set my face like a flint, and I know that I shall not be ashamed. He is near that justifies me. Who will contend with me? Let us stand together. Who is my adversary? Let him come near to me. Behold, Adonai Yahuwah will help me. Who is he that shall condemn me? Lo, they all shall wax old as a garment. The moth shall eat them up. Who is among you that fears Yahuwah, that obeys the voice of his servant, that walks in darkness and has no light? Let him trust in the name of Yahuwah and stay upon his Elohim. So Yahuwah spoke through the prophet Yeshayahu that he will send a certain servant to deal with this issue of the divorce certificate with the house of Yasharal. Philippians chapter 2. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Mashiach Yahusha, who being in the form of Elohim, thought it not robbery to be equal with Elohim, but made himself of no reputation, and took upon him the form of a servant, and was made in the likeness of men. And being found in fashion as a man, he humbled himself, and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. Wherefore Elohim has highly exalted him, and given him a name which is above every name. So we see that Yahushua HaMashiach became a servant. He took on the role of a servant, and he took on the likeness of men. He took on a human body, and he humbled himself unto death. And it says that Elohim, the Father, gave him a name which is above every name. What name is above every name? Is Yahusha that name above every name? We have seen in the Tanakh several Israelite men that have had the name Yahusha. The name above every name is Yahuwah. So we see that Shaul or Paul recognized that Yahushua Mashiach is that being that was referred in the Tanakh as the messenger Yahuwah. Ibrahim, or Hebrews chapter 10, quoted from Tehillim, or Psalm chapter 40. For it is not possible that the blood of bulls and of goats should take away sins. Wherefore, when he comes into the world, he said, Sacrifice and offering you would not, but a body have you prepared me. So Shaul Paul is quoting from the scriptures. He's actually quoting from Tehillim, or Psalm chapter 40. If you read that passage in Psalm from the KJV, which is based on the Masoretic text, you're not going to find this reference. It's going to be a bit different. According to the KJV, it says, Sacrifice and offering you did not desire. My ears have you opened. Burnt offering and sin offering have you not required. But if you read Psalm 40 from a translation that is based on the Septuagint, which is a much older translation of the Tanakh, you're going to read, Sacrifice and offering you would not, but a body have you prepared me. Whole burnt offering and sacrifice for sin you did not require. Through the words of the psalmist, Yahuwah revealed that there was a plan that a body would be prepared for this certain servant. Verse 6, In burnt offerings and sacrifices for sin you have had no pleasure. So why is it talking about having no pleasure in offerings and sacrifices for sin? We need to go to the Torah, Menorah, or Numbers chapter 15. And the priest shall make an atonement for the soul that sins ignorantly, when he sins by ignorance before Yahuwah, to make an atonement for him, and it shall be forgiven him. You shall have one Torah for him that sins through ignorance, both for him that is born among the children of Yasharal, and for the stranger that sojourns among them. But the soul that does aught presumptuously, whether he be born in the land or a stranger, the same reproaches Yahuwah. And that soul shall be cut off from among his people, because he has despised the word of Yahuwah, and has broken his commandment. That soul shall utterly be cut off, his iniquity shall be upon him. So we see that the Torah concerning sacrifices for sin, the sacrifice for sin is only for sins of ignorance. When you break the Torah because of ignorance, because of a mistake, when it is not intentional. But when you break the Torah, when you break the laws and commandments of Yahuwah presumptuously, that is, to break them or disobey them intentionally, there is no sacrifice for that sin. That's why it says, in burnt offerings and sacrifices for sin, you have had no pleasure, because the house of Yashral broke the commandments intentionally. They worshipped idols, false deities. They did things intentionally to break the laws and commandments of Yahuwah. Verse 7, Then said I, Lo, I come in the volume of the book. It is written of me, to do your will, O Elohim. So who is this speaking of? Luke chapter 24. And he said unto them, These are the words which I spoke unto you, while I was yet with you, that all things must be fulfilled, which were written in the Torah of Musa, and in the prophets, and in the Psalms concerning me. So Yahushua Mashiach revealed that Musa wrote about him in the Torah. Who did Musa write about? He wrote about the angel of Yahuwah, Malach Yahuwah. Yehukanan, or John chapter 5. For had you believed Musha, you would have believed me, for he wrote of me. So again, Musha wrote about the messenger Yahuwah, and this is who Yahushua HaMashiach claimed to be. Colossians chapter 2. And you, being dead in your sins and the uncircumcision of your flesh, has he quickened together with him, having forgiven you all trespasses, blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us, which was contrary to us, and took it out of the way, nailing it to his stake. So what was nailed to the stake? What was blotted out? What is this handwriting of ordinances? Is it saying that the Torah was done away with? The Torah was nailed to a stake? No, that is not what Shaul or Paul was talking about. Remember, we talked about the law of divorce in Devarim, or Deuteronomy chapter 24. When a man has taken a wife and married her, and it come to pass that he find no favor in his eyes, because he has found some uncleanness in her, then let him write her a bill of divorcement, and give it in her hand, and send her out of his house. So the husband writes a bill of divorcement. That is the handwriting of ordinances. Malach Yahuwah gave a bill of divorcement to the house of Yasharal because of their sins, because of their unfaithfulness, because of their adulteries, because of their disobedience. And they were exiled out of the land. Yahushua came in the form of a human being. A body was prepared for him, and he came as the servant to deal with the bill of divorcement, to take it out of the way. So this is what we have. Malach Yahuwah came in the form of a human being as Yahushua HaMashiach. The house of Yehuda still had a marriage covenant with Malach Yahuwah. So we see that Yahushua came in the form of a human being through the house of Yehuda. Yahushua died. He died on the stake. When he died, that bill of divorcement was nullified. In the resurrection, there is a new covenant, and he ascended back into the Shamayim. He ascended into the heavens. Ephesians chapter 2. For he is our peace, who had made both one, and has broken down the middle wall of partition between us. Between who? Between the house of Yehuda and the house of Yasharal. Having abolished in his flesh the enmity, even the law of commandments contained in ordinances, for to make in himself of twain one new man, so making peace. So he abolished through his flesh, through his death, the bill of divorcement, making the two one man. The house of Yehuda and the house of Yasharal made one again, and that he might reconcile both unto Elohim in one body by the stake, having slain the enmity thereby. So this is what Shaul Paul was talking about in Colossians chapter 2, blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us, which was contrary to us, and took it out of the way, nailing it to his stake. He blotted out or nullified the bill of divorcement that was given to the house of Yasharal. Yehukanan chapter 4. You worship you know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Yahudim. Matthew chapter 10. He gave this instruction to his disciples, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Yasharal. So we see that Yahushua HaMashiach came to the house of Yehuda, which had the covenant, was still maintaining the marriage covenant, and he told them to go to the lost sheep of the house of Yasharal. So we see this commandment even repeated after his resurrection, that he told his disciples to feed his sheep. So the house of Yehuda, commonly called the Jews or Judeans, otherwise known as the circumcision, those that are nigh, those that are near, were given the commandment to go to the Israelites and spread the good news of the new covenant, the renewed covenant, to the house of Yasharal, commonly called the Gentiles, or the uncircumcision, or those that were afar. So the letters of the apostles were written to the Israelites of the house of Yasharal to notify them of the ministry of Yahushua HaMashiach and what he did, and to notify them of a renewed marriage covenant, and to invite them back into a relationship with Yahuwah. Ephesians chapter 5. Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as unto the master. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Mashiach is the head of the assembly, and he is the Savior of the body. And that word for assembly or church is the Greek word ekklesia, which means a gathering of citizens called out from their homes into a public place, an assembly. So this is a reference to the nation of Yasharal. The nation of Yasharal is the called out congregation. Therefore, as the assembly is subject unto Mashiach, so let the wives be to their own husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, even as Mashiach also loved the assembly and gave himself for it. So Mashiach gave his life for the nation of Yasharal. He gave his life to bring the house of Yasharal back into the congregation. Acts chapter 7. This is he that was in the assembly in the wilderness with the angel which spoke to him in the Mount Sinai, and with our fathers, who received the lively oracles to give unto us. So we see that this word, commonly translated as church, ecclesia, refers to the nation of Yasharal, because this is what they used it as. This is he that was in the assembly or the church in the wilderness, talking about the nation of Yasharal that was in the wilderness and received the laws and commandments from Yah. Verse 26, that he might sanctify and cleanse it with the washing of the water by the word. So let's go to Hezekiah or Ezekiel chapter 36. Therefore say unto the house of Yasharal, thus says Adonai Yahuwah, I do not this for your sakes, O house of Yasharal, but for my set-apart name's sake, which you have profaned among the heathen where you went. Then will I sprinkle clean water upon you, and you shall be clean. From all your filthiness and from all your idols will I cleanse you. So this was a promise through the prophet Ezekiel to the house of Yasharal, that he would cleanse the house of Yasharal, the house that was divorced, he would cleanse them. Verse 27, that he might present it to himself as a esteemed assembly, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that it should be set apart and without blemish. Verse 32, this is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Mashiach and the assembly. So Mashiach and the nation of Yasharal. This is a marriage covenant. So Yahushua HaMashiach gave his life. He died to nullify that bill of divorcement so that he could renew the covenant, that marriage covenant with the house of Yasharal. Matthew chapter 27, also Mark 15 and Luke 23. Behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom, and the earth did quake, and the rocks rent. Hebrews or Hebrews chapter 10. Having therefore, brothers, boldness to enter into the holy, or the set apart, by the blood of Yahushua, by a new and living way, which he has consecrated for us through the veil, that is to say, his flesh. So we see berit, the Hebrew word that is translated as covenant, alliance, and pledge, because made by passing between pieces of flesh. This is how the ancient Israelites made a covenant, by passing through pieces of flesh. So we see that Yahushua made a new covenant, a renewed covenant, through the tearing of his flesh. Matthew chapter 22. And the same day came to him the Sadducees, which say that there is no resurrection, and asked him, saying, Master, Moshe said, if a man die, having no children, his brother shall marry his wife, and raise up seed unto his brother. Now there were with us 7 brothers, and the first, when he had married a wife, deceased, and having no issue, left his wife unto his brother. Likewise the second also, and the third unto the 7th, and the last of all, the woman died also. Therefore in the resurrection, whose wife shall she be of the 7? For they all had her. So this is a question that they posed to Yahushua, because they did not believe in the resurrection. Verse 29, Yahushua answered and said unto them, you do err, not knowing the scriptures, nor the power of Elohim. For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the Malachim, or the angels of Elohim in heaven. So what he replied is, you don't know the scriptures, because according to the scripture, when a man dies, that marriage covenant is nullified. That's why he said in the resurrection, they neither marry or are given in marriage. A man marries a woman is given in marriage. So when a person dies and they are resurrected back into life, there is no marriage covenant, because that marriage covenant is nullified when a person dies. 1 Corinthians chapter 7. The wife is bound by the Torah as long as her husband lives. But if her husband be dead, she is at liberty to be married to whom she will, only in Yahuwah. So this is the Torah concerning marriage. A marriage covenant is binding while the husband lives. If the husband dies, then the wife is freed from that marriage covenant, because the marriage covenant is nullified. This is why it was necessary for Malach Yahuwah to come in human form, so that he could die, and that marriage covenant that was made between him and the houses of Yehuda and the house of Yasharal be nullified, so that that divorce certificate could be nullified. And when he resurrected, he offered a renewed covenant, a new covenant. the same marriage covenant, the same rules and expectations, the same laws, commandments, and statutes he offered to those who are willing to return to him in that marriage covenant. Romans chapter 7. Know you not, brothers, for I speak to them that know the Torah, how that the Torah has dominion over man as long as he lives. For the woman which has a husband is bound by the Torah to her husband so long as he lives. But if the husband be dead, she is loosed from the Torah of her husband. So then, if while her husband lives, she be married to another man, she shall be called an adulteress. But if her husband be dead, she is free from that Torah, so that she is no adulteress, though she be married to another man. So Shaul or Paul is explaining this concept that comes from the Torah, that a marriage covenant is binding when the husband is alive, but when the husband dies, that marriage covenant is no longer binding. Verse 22. By so much was Yahusha made a surety of a better testament. So that word better comes from the Greek kreiton, which means stronger. And testament is the Greek diatheke, which means covenant. So Yahusha was made surety of a stronger covenant, a stronger marriage covenant, that is the renewed covenant. He made the covenant stronger. Chapter 9. And for this cause he is the mediator of the New Testament. That's the same word, diatheke, meaning covenant. So he's the mediator of the new covenant, or renewed covenant, that by means of death, for the redemption of the transgressions that were under the first covenant. What transgressions? The adulteries of the house of Yasharal. Those adulteries, those transgressions happened when they were bound under the first covenant, the first testament. They which are called might receive the promise of eternal inheritance. So Yahusha nullified the first covenant through his death. He nullified the bill of divorce through his death so that he could make a stronger covenant, a renewed covenant. They which are called might receive the promise of eternal inheritance. Who was called? The nation of Yasharal. So he died so that the house of Yasharal could come back into the fold and receive the eternal inheritance. Verse 16. For where a testament is, there must also of necessity be the death of the testator. For a testament is of force after men are dead, otherwise it is of no strength at all while the testator lives. Shaul Paul is explaining the reason why Malach Yahuwah came in human form as Yahusha and died. Whereupon neither the first testament was dedicated without blood. For when Musha had spoken every precept to all the people according to the Torah, he took the blood of calves and of goats with water and scarlet wool and hyssop and sprinkled both the book and all the people, saying, This is the blood of the testament, which Elohim has enjoined unto you, or the blood of the covenant. Moreover, he sprinkled with blood both the tabernacle and all the vessels of the ministry, and almost all things are by the Torah purged with blood, and without shedding of blood is no remission. So he's explaining that the first covenant that was made with the nation of Yasharal was dedicated with blood. And so the second covenant, the renewed covenant, is dedicated with blood. Both of these covenants are marriage covenants. The same terms and conditions apply with both covenants. The same laws, commandments, and statutes that were declared in the first covenant are the same laws, statutes, and commandments that are required in the renewed covenant. So, Yahusha, as Malach Yahuwah, made a marriage covenant with the nation of Yasharal. After the nation of Yasharal divided into two houses, the house of Yasharal and the house of Yehuda, because of their sins, because of their idolatries, because of their disobedience, the house of Yasharal was given a bill of divorcement and sent into exile. They lost their name as Yasharal and became known as Gentiles. However, Yahuwah promised that even though they received a bill of divorcement, there would be a servant sent that would deal with that bill of divorcement and enable the house of Yasharal to enter back into marriage covenant with Yahuwah, that is Malach Yahuwah. So we have Malach Yahuwah as a divine being. A body was prepared for him, and he incarnated as a man, taking the form of a servant, as we know him as Yahushua HaMashiach. Yahushua HaMashiach declared a new covenant, a renewed covenant. He died, and when he died, that bill of divorcement was nullified. When he resurrected, he gave his disciples the commandment to go out to the house of Yasharal, those Israelites that had become known as Gentiles, to declare to them the good news of the renewed covenant, so that they would return back to the covenant, become obedient to the laws, commandments, and statutes of Yahuwah, and enter back into a marriage relationship with Malach Yahuwah. Yahuwah, we thank you for your love. We thank you for your word. We thank you for your servant, Yahushua HaMashiach, who is faithful and who loved his people, the nation of Yasharal, and gave his life to redeem them, to bring them back into relationship. We ask that you help us to return to the ancient ways, to return to the renewed covenant, to become obedient to your laws, statutes, and commandments. To you be all esteem, honor, forever and ever.
Fear Elohim and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Bind up the testimony, seal the Torah among my disciples. Shalom, family. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to click the subscribe button. Like, comment, and share.